with this deep loathing that many of us feel for institutional political figures and lawmakers from across the spectrum, because of the assumption that they are investing in stocks and shares that they have the ability to regulate and therefore benefit from, the assumption that companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon wield incredible power over American foreign policy, including the participation in wars that simply wouldn't happen if a more diplomatic perspective were allowed to thrive, or even, let's face it, a more democratic or representative perspective. What have you experienced of that? Are there like points where you feel like, well, I know this, that this bill's likely to be passed, I should buy some stocks in Lockheed Martin? Like, what's lobbying like on the ground? What's it like to get lobbied? Is it true there are 2 lobbyists for every member of Congress? And where does the lobbying take place? What is the prophylactic against lobbying?
Okay, this is the huge one. There's a lot of questions there. There are far more than 2 lobbyists per member of Congress. Many, many, many more. Many more. I couldn't even begin to count. One of the first things that happened is every member of Congress, you get elected, you go through what they call orientation briefings. And first they happen in a bipartisan sense where you have Democrats and Republicans, you go and sit in a room and, you get a brief on the ethics rules, you get a brief on, here's how the process works. You get briefs on here's the big issues of the day that you should be somewhat educated on, kind of a 101 introduction. And then they break us off into 2 different places and rooms and buses. Democrats go one way, the Republicans go the other way. And the briefings that I got as a new Democrat in Congress at the end of 2012, sworn in early 2013, were very much the same as those that my Republican colleagues got in a few distinct ways. Number one is, I remember they had a PowerPoint slide up showing how your average day would look. And it was shocking to me. I got to find that image because I remember capturing a picture with my phone. But the predominant amount of time, hours in the day, spent at fundraisers with lobbyists or on the phone calling lobbyists and asking for money was the majority of the day. Really, so the amount of time you spent in your committees doing policy work or on the House floor for votes, on average, let's say it's 4 or 5 hours a day. The rest of the day you are spending fundraising. I went and I saw, okay, we'll go to 2 different fundraising breakfasts every morning. You'll sit around a table with a bunch of lobbyists and, you talk about different issues or whatever, and you leave with a bunch of envelopes with political campaign contributions. And then on average, a member of Congress will go and have 1 or 2 lunches. Same situation. And then you'll probably go and have another fundraising dinner on any given day of the week, and make sure you go in and pop in and make sure that, get those phone calls to make sure that people show up to the next days of fundraisers. And this is how people raise tens of millions of dollars, all in the course of a day's work. I saw this, I experienced it when I first got there, and I was just like, man, this is wrong. I don't like this at all. And so I stopped taking any lobbyist contributions and political action committee contributions. And I loved it because I saw how my day was completely freed up. I was able to focus on my policy work and substantive work in Congress, talking to my constituents in Hawaii. But I saw the contrast. And one of my friends who was a lobbyist for a renewable energy industry, she told me, she said, "Oh, wow, you're not taking any more money from lobbyists?" I said, "No." She's like, "Well, you're obviously never running for any higher office ever again. Your political career is done. You are where you are, and that's it." I talked to some like grassroots organizers who were working on different issues who came and visited me, and they said, "Oh my gosh, Tulsi, you stopped taking lobbyist money and PAC money. You must obviously be running for president." And it was just a funny contrast that happened in the course of a couple of days between the Washington insider perception, which is you will never go anywhere in politics unless you take our money, and the opposite coming from people who were like, the $5, $10 donations, the small dollar donations to support the candidate that they like, going out and knocking on doors and making phone calls, joining the cause of actually bringing about grassroots change. And their perception was exactly the opposite. Like, oh, thank God, you don't have anything to do with those corrupt Washington insiders. It is the power of the people who will prevail. I want to talk about the stocks, because this is a big one. I never to answer your question directly, I never sat there and looked at a vote coming up and saying, I wonder how Microsoft is going to react to this vote. Let me go and buy some Microsoft stock. I saw the opposite. I went in knowing that perception is reality, and I did not do any stock trading at all of any sort for the 8 years that I was in Congress, because whether or not they are acting on insider information or it's just some happy coincidence that they buy $1 million of stock that magically goes up 200% within the next week when a vote is taken, it doesn't really matter, because perception is reality. Members of Congress, elected leaders, are held and should be held to a higher standard, and should not be in that position where there's even a perception that you are acting in your own self-interest. So I introduced legislation when I was in Congress that would have prohibited a member of Congress, their spouse, or their senior staff, their chief of staff, from trading in any stocks, because you have access to information that the public does not have, whether you're acting on it or not. Perception is reality, and it's just wrong. It's just wrong. Both sides are doing it. They're making a lot of money. I've seen those memes that people put out that show different members of like what their net worth was when they started, and obviously the longer they're there, the more wealthy they become, and they're no longer really truly representing the interests of the people.
How did that legislation go that you introduced?
What do you think? What do you think? They're still doing it, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Hey, this is exciting. We've got a great partner today. It's Rumble. But beyond Rumble, it's Rumble's latest venture. Let me ask you first, are you a Sleepy Joe type character with zero cognitive performance, struggling to muster focus and brain power for basic things like running the United States of America? You've got to stop drinking woke liberal coffee that hates you and your way of life and start your day by drinking Rumble's very own 1775 coffee. This is going to be the best tasting coffee you've ever had. Seriously good, ethically sourced from a family farm in the high altitude mountains of Bolivia. Not in the Bolivian lowlands, run not by a family but by a single man still living with a pet. No! Instead of waking up and drinking your big corporation-owned woke ideology coffee that's probably making you sick from the pesticides it's sprayed with, try Rumble's 1775 revolutionary coffee. Support freedom of speech. Build a parallel economy that actually values you and loves you. My favourite? It's dark, of course. I've always found the lure of the dark irresistible. I'm sorry, how can I stay mad at you? You're just going to have to wait over there for a little while. Level up your morning routine with a 1775 coffee. Sleep all night knowing your hard-earned dollary dues are going towards supporting freedom-loving creators like me on Rumble. Visit 1775coffee.com now, pick up your first bag, use the code BRAND to save 10% on your first order. Oh, come on. Why choose, Okay, back to the content.
In a way, that's an indication of the kind of systemic problems that need to be addressed, obviously. You said before that you're economically populist, and it seems to me that populism oughtn't be, as it has become, a kind of dirty word conflated, as many things are, with racism and the right. But it ought be a contract between the people and their elected officials and lawmakers. Do you feel that part of what we're experiencing, whether it's with the TikTok ban or the anti-Semitism bill, is the understanding in the houses and institutions of power that what currently yet exists with social media, even impeded as it is, with the rise of independent media, with the phenomenal ability to generate and spread counter narratives, is first of all the requirement of categories that didn't even exist, like malinformation, which obviously I know I've heard you talk about it. It means information that's true, but it's really inconvenient that it's true. Do you feel that, in a sense, the underlying agenda of power is currently to ensure that no populist movement that opposes the real interests that are masked behind the masquerade and charade of American political life, as you have just described it, never get any purchase, never have any impact?
Yes, and it speaks to that elitist mindset of people in Washington who do see populism or populists as a bad word. They see it as a bad word because they think that they know what's best, and they alone should be able to make the decisions that the rest of us have to live under They're afraid of us actually having access to information that we can gather, opinions or views that may not be sanctioned or constructive for the objectives of the Washington elite and the power elite. They may not be helpful to the corporate elitists or the political elitists. And so they are afraid. They're afraid of a free people in a free society because we actually pose the greatest threat to their power. Our country was built upon we the people, and we have the authority to choose whether or not we want a government of, by, and for the people. The power is in our hands, but unfortunately, and I get it, it's justified in many ways, why so many people don't even vote. They throw up their hands and say, well, my vote's not going to count. The system is too corrupt. The elections are already rigged. I'm just going to stay home and complain about it and talk about it. And I know the problems, but not actually use my voice and my vote to bring about change. And that is my call to action in my book, is exactly that. We are only powerful if we choose to use our power. We can only bring about change in this system and in our government if we choose to make that happen. And yes, it's got to start with stopping the destruction of our democracy and our freedom that we're seeing right now. But it really happens at every level. We have people in Board of Education and City Council and state legislatures and in Congress. And of course, for president, we have to bring about this kind of change to get the right people in office who are actually focused on serving the people rather than serving the interests of the elite or the bureaucracies.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.